I'm continuing with part two of the forward of Project 2025's forward. The next conservative president should go beyond merely defending America's energy interests, but go on offense, asserting them around the world. America's vast reserves of oil and natural gas are not an environmental problem. They are the lifeblood of economic growth. American dominance of the global energy market would be a good thing for the world and, more importantly, for, in quotation marks, we the people. It's not just about jobs, even though unleashing domestic energy production would create millions of them. It's not just about higher wages for workers who didn't go to college, though they would receive the raises they have missed out on for 2 generations. Full spectrum strategic energy dominance would facilitate the reinvigoration of America's entire industrial and manufacturing sector as we disentangle our economy from China. Globally, it would rebalance power away from dangerous regimes in Russia and the Middle East. It would build powerful alliances with fast-growing nations in Africa and provide us the leverage to counter Chinese ambitions in South America and the Pacific. Locally, it would drive billions of dollars of private investment to the communities that have been hammered by globalization since the 1990s. And it would clarify our intentions to Beijing that the next president can ensure that a large part of America's reindustrialization is in the production of the equipment we will need to dissuade further foreign meddling with U.S. vital interests. Promise 4. Secure our God-given individual right to enjoy, in quotation marks, the blessings of liberty. The Declaration of Independence famously asserted the belief of America's founders that, in quotation marks, all men are created equal and endowed with God-given rights to, in quotation marks, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, in quotation marks. It's the last, in quotation marks, the pursuit of happiness, in quotation marks, that is central to America's heroic experiment in self-government. When the founders spoke of, in quotation marks, pursuit of happiness, in quotations, what they meant might be understood today as, in essence, in quotation marks, pursuit of blessedness, in quotation marks. That is, an individual must be free to live as his creator ordained to flourish. Our Constitution grants each of us the liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. This pursuit of the good life is found primarily in family, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners, and the like. Many find happiness through their work. Think of dedicated teachers or healthcare professionals you know, entrepreneurs or plumbers throwing themselves into their businesses, anyone who sees a job well done as a personal reward. Religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Still others find themselves happiest in their local voluntary community of friends, their neighbors, their civic or charitable work. The American Republic was founded on principles prioritizing and maximizing individuals' rights to live their best life or to enjoy what the framers called, in quotation marks, the blessings of liberty, in quotation marks. It's this radical equality, liberty for all, not just of rights, but of authority, that the rich and powerful have hated about democracy in America since 1776. They resent Americans' audacity in insisting that we don't need them to tell us how to live. It's this inalienable right of self-direction, of each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself and his or her community to the good that the ruling class disdains. With the Declaration and Constitution, our nation's founders handed to us the means with which to preserve this right. Abraham Lincoln wrote of the Declaration as an, in quotation marks, apple of gold, end quote, in a silver frame, the Constitution. So must the next conservative president look to these documents when the elites mount their next assault on liberty. Left to our own devices, the American people rejected European monarchy and colonialism just as we rejected slavery, second-class citizenship for women, mercantilism, socialism, Wilsonian globalism, fascism, communism, and in quotation marks today, wokeism. To the left, these assertions of patriotic self-assurance are just so many signs of our moral depravity and intellectual inferiority, proof that, in fact, we need a ruling elite making decisions for us. But the next conservative president should be proud, not ashamed, of Americans' unique culture of social equality and ordered liberty. After all, the countries where Marxist elites have won political and economic power are all weaker, poorer, and less free for it. The United States remains the most innovative and upwardly mobile society in the world. Government should stop trying to substitute its own preferences for those of the people. And the next conservative president should champion the dynamic genius of free enterprise against the grim miseries of elite-directed socialism. The promise of socialism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, fascism, whatever name it chooses, is simple. Government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes for all people. The problem is that it has never done so. There is no such thing as, in quotation marks, the government, end quote. There are just people who work for the government and wield its power, and who at almost every opportunity willed it to serve themselves first and everyone else a distant second. This is not a failing of one nation or socialist party, but inherent in human nature. Nighttime satellite images of the Korean Peninsula famously showed the free market South lit up with homes, businesses, and cities electrified from coast to coast. By contrast, communist North Korea is almost completely dark, except for the small dot of the capital city, Pyongyang, where a psychotic dictator and his cronies live. The same phenomena is on display in the infuriating fact that 4 of the 6 richest counties in the United States are suburbs of Washington, D.C., a city infamous for its lack of native productive industries. We see the same corruption expressed on an individual level whenever billionaire climate activists who want to outlaw carbon-fueled transportation fly to A-list conferences on their private jets, or when COVID-19 shut down politicians like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and California Governor Gavin Newsom were caught at their hair salon or dining at fancy restaurants after moralizing about how everyone else must stay home and forego such luxuries during the pandemic. For socialists who are almost always well-to-do, socialism is not a means of equalizing outcomes, but a means of accumulating power. They never get around to helping anyone else. The Soviet Empire was a social and economic failure. North Korea, despite the opulence of its tyrants, is one of the poorest nations in the world. Cuba is so corrupt that its people regularly risk their lives to escape to Florida on rafts. Venezuela was once the richest nation in South America. Today, a decade after a Marxist dictator took over, 94% of Venezuelans live in poverty. Even Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont was forced to repeal the state's single payer health care system just 3 years after creating it. In every case, socialist elites promised if only they could direct the economy, everything would be better. Very quickly, everything got worse. In socialist nation after socialist nation, the only way the government could keep its disgruntled people in line was to surveil and terrorize them. By contrast, in countries with a high degree of economic freedom, elites are not in charge because everyone is in charge. People work, build, invest, save, and create according to their own interests and in service to the common good of their fellow citizens. There is a reason why the private economy hews to the maxim, in quotation marks, the customer is always right, end of quote. While government bureaucracies are notoriously user unfriendly, just as there is a reason why private charities are cheerful and government welfare systems are not. It's not because grocery store clerks and PTA moms are, quote, good and federal bureaucrats are, quote, bad. It's because private enterprise, for profit or non-profit, must cooperate to give to succeed. So as the American people take back their sovereignty, constitutional authority, respect for their families and communities, they should also take back their right to pursue a good life. The next president should promote pro-growth economic policies that spur new jobs and investment, higher wages and productivity. Yes, that agenda should include overdue tax and regulatory reform, but it should go further and include antitrust enforcement against corporate monopolies. It should promote educational opportunities outside the woke-dominated system of public schools and universities, including trade schools, apprenticeship programs, and student loan alternatives that fund students' dream instead of Marxist academies or academics. Just as important as expanding opportunities for workers and small businesses, the next president should crack down on the crony capitalist corruption that enables America's largest corporations to profit through political influence rather than competitive enterprise and customer satisfaction. Analogous pro-growth reforms for America's voluntary civil society are also in order. America is not an economy, it's a country. Economic freedom is not the only important freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the freedom to assemble also represent key components of the American promise. Today, in addition to the problem of big tech censorship, we see speakers at universities shouted down, parents investigated and arrested for attempting to speak at school, board meetings and donors to conservative causes harassed and intimidated. The next conservative president must defend our First Amendment rights. Ultimately, the left does not believe that all men are created equal. They think they are special. They certainly don't think all people have an unalienable right to pursue a good life. They think only they themselves have such a right, along with a moral responsibility to make decisions for everyone else. They don't think any citizen, state, business, church, or charity should be allowed any freedom until they first bend the knee. This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors. Our movement has not been united in recent years, and our country has paid the price. In the past decade, though, the breakdown of the family, the rise of China, The great awakening, big tech's abuses, and the erosion of constitutional accountability in Washington have rendered these divisions not just inconvenient, but politically suicidal. Every hour, the left directs federal policy and elite institutions, our sovereignty, our Constitution, our families, and our freedom are a step closer to disappearing. Conservatives have just 2 years and one shot to get this right. With enemies at home and abroad, there's no margin for error. Time is running short. If we fail, the fight for the very idea of America may be lost. But we should take this small window of opportunity we have left to act with courage and confidence, not despair. The last time our nation and movement were so near defeat, we rallied together behind a great leader and great ideas, transcended our differences, rescued our nation, and changed the world. It's time to do it again. Now is then we know who we are fighting and what we are fighting for our republic, our freedom, and for each other. The next conservative president will enter office on January 20, 2025 with a simple choice, greatness or failure. It will be a daunting test, but no more so than every generation of America has faced and passed. The conservative promise represents the best effort of the conservative movement in 2023 and the next conservative president's last opportunity to save our republic. Now, people, as I said, they are no longer saying the quiet parts in the dark. They are saying them out loud. Please do your bit. Educate yourself. Read. Again, I will attempt to do other episodes where I touch on other parts of, as I said, this manifesto, which is approximately 1,000 pages. I implore you to do your homework as well. And by do your homework, what I mean is if you don't watch the news, I'm not understanding. I get that it's very depressing, but the stakes are so very high. They really are. Vote. Please get out and vote. Please make sure you are registered to vote. We indeed are living in challenging times, but I believe that the entire world is in a state of transition. And we the people get to decide. Now, it's interesting to me that the conservatives represent a small segment of the populace in the United States, but as you see, they are leaving their footprint and imprint on every aspect of our lives. They seem determined to impose their will, their way of thinking, their way of being upon all of us, regardless of what we believe, what we the people do in fact want. So it's incumbent upon you, me, we the people, to send them the message that no, that's not how it works. Please do your part. And as usual, and always, I thank you for sharing or listening to my thoughts. Again, Go to project2025.org, go to the heritagefoundation.org, where you can see for yourself. You've heard of the Heritage Foundation, I'm sure. That's how the three most recent justices were chosen on the U.S. Supreme Court from a list that was proposed or that has been put together by the Heritage Foundation. In recent months, we've had in the United States, as a result of Roe versus Wade being overturned, states across the United States have enacted various laws to restrict a woman's right to have an abortion, which also has impacted women's rights to possibly have IVF, which has also, one state has decreed that quote, embryos are people. In other words, the embryos that have not even been implanted, state of Alabama has held that they are considered children for their purposes. Arizona recently relied upon a law that was in effect in the late 1900s when Arizona was not even a state. As you see, our work is cut out for us. Thank you again.